Hello, you're watching Initiative Africa. My name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to your weekly magazine featuring Africa on the move through smart innovations and initiatives that work. Today, with our guest, we lift the veil on a lesser-known issue, water, which is obviously linked to climate change. Not enough water or too much, we will look at the Beninese experience. Well, it's time for Initiative Africa. Let's get on with the show with our top stories today. Protecting our water resources is a priority that is becoming increasingly urgent in the context of climate change, and it is a key issue for Menno Holterman. He is the chairman of Naira Industries, a key player in preserving the world's precious water resources. He's our guest today.
With the increasing welfare, people like to have access to a lot of luxury goods, food, beverage, air conditioning, and that all is driving up the demand for clean water around the world.
We discover a traditional restaurant appealing to tourists. Totot is an establishment in Addis Ababa. Gourmet food from all over Ethiopia, over 200 jobs created, and a very profitable business.
My customers are largely expatriates, tourists, the Ethiopian diaspora and others. Primarily, they are tourists.
Benin stands up to climate change and floods with an early warning system.
We often have floods with no warning. Our crops are destroyed and many children are killed.
We head for Ethiopia to Addis Ababa for this first report, a fairy tale story of a shoeshine boy. It was Tenkir Teni's job more than 30 years ago before he ventured into gastronomy. Today he runs Totot, a $4 million traditional restaurant with over 200 employees. Our correspondent in Ethiopia, Tefera Gedamu, followed his story. Take a look.
Here it is, robust, big, recognizable. A must-go eatery for people with money seeking quality traditional Ethiopian food.
My customers are largely expatriates, tourists, the Ethiopian diaspora and others. Primarily, they are tourists.
But Tenkir Teni has come a long way. He was on track with a totally different idea.
This is where it all started. This is where I started as a shoeshine boy.
And that was 33 years ago.
I'm telling him that the trick lies not in the amount you earn, but in the ability to save from whatever little income you earn.
Born in a village 150 kilometers from the capital Addis Ababa, Tenkir comes from the Gurage community, known for starting at the very bottom.
They start as shoeshines or helpers in a restaurant. These are naturally intelligent people who can see the way forward and have vision in terms of what business they want to create.
Only 3 months into shoeshining, Tenkir started supplementing his income by selling consumables like cigarettes, chewing gum, and more. 8 years later, a consultation with his growing number of clients birthed another business idea that was to define him in the years ahead.
They used to send me to get them food from several small restaurants in the neighborhood. That is when I consulted them about opening mine. And I started it here. It was built with corrugated iron sheets on a space of just 12 square meters in a capital of 6,000 birr, $111.
Lots of hard work, followed by saving, prompted this young entrepreneur to upgrade his restaurant. And as coincidence would have it, that happened to be at the time Ethiopia found itself in a marked economic turnaround.
In the past 20 years, the economy has been growing. Financial Times, normally a very conservative newspaper, in 2020 wrote saying that the fastest economy in the world has been for the decade 2010-2020 Ethiopia. So that means there is a lot of fallout from this economic growth for startups to grow very fast.
His new restaurant, Totot's Ethiopian clientele, was thus to absorb the offers of a much more expensive food outlet. Over the years, the clients became even more diverse.
We have a diverse local and international menu. We prepare food from all corners of Ethiopia. We showcase the cultures of all Ethiopians. And our expatriate customers are stunned. It is a center where various important people come to be entertained.
And one of them happens to be the blockbuster rush hour star, Jackie Chan.
Like all the others, I opened Totat to make money. But it has become a means for introducing Ethiopian culture, our identity, to the rest of the world. I unintentionally fell into it, but it has become an invaluable cultural institution with big benefits to the country.
The music was really good. I thought that the dancing was really fun, and I like all the different regional dances. It's quite different from the dancing we do at home, but it was fun, and I think it's a beautiful dance.
And it's become part of the standard, we could say, tourist package. That when clients, particularly when on their last night, there'll be a farewell dinner, they'll be able to see singing and dancing from different regions. Generally, they all enjoy it.
The sector has now become a significant player in the Ethiopian economy.
Now we have more than 400 hotels, more than 6,000 restaurants and cafes in Addis Ababa only. The service sector has grown very fast. It has taken over the agricultural sector.
Indeed, Totot claims a slice of that growth. It took off with only 36 employees and has since made a significant leap in the last 15 years.
I now have 202 employees here, and they have their own families. They have a steady job.
Having created an institution that's worth over $4 million, he is even aiming higher.
Totat is now a brand name, and I would like to see big African as well as other investors and companies to join me. I have just finalized a project to establish a small Ethiopia. The design of an institution that would showcase the preparation of Ethiopian food and beverages, craftsmanship and cultural outfits is now ready. And it's called the Pan-African Village Ethiopian Restaurant Totat.
In our country now, beyond restaurant businesses, a lot of rags to rich people are available in this nation, and we see them coming up every year. But the problem is the regulatory environment and government policy.
And the government seems to have realized that, particularly after the industry was hit hard by COVID-19 and the war that followed in the Tigray region.
Our guest this week, Menno Holterman, a Dutch entrepreneur and investor. He was one of the founders of the annual International Water Week in Amsterdam. He is the chairman of the Nairo Industries and is a great advocate for water resources, a growing concern worldwide, particularly in Africa. I met him in Dubai to discuss the rising risks of scarcity and the solutions at hand. Hello, Menno Holterman. Welcome to Initiative Africa. You are the Chief Executive Officer, Nairo Industries. I'd like to start with a global overview of water scarcity. Cities in the world as well as rural areas face elevated risks if sufficient water for different uses and ecosystems is no longer available. What is at stake today around the world? How are the water resources distributed in the world?
So thank you very much, Asha. It's a question which probably deserves an answer from different angles. First of all, we see that water indeed is becoming scarce, not in the typical areas where a lot of people know about, in for example, Ethiopia, but we see everywhere around the equator today that there's a shortage of water or too much water. So we see a lot of floods. Devastating floods, also recently in Pakistan. And at the same time we see, sometimes even a couple of weeks later, that drought is kicking in. And droughts for a long time are really impacting the social and the economical life of people. Almost 70% of the world population is going to live in cities according to the United Nations. Many of these cities are already crowded. With the increasing welfare, people like to have access to a lot of luxury goods, food, beverage, air conditioning, and that all is driving up the demand for clean water around the world.
Could you tell us about the SOAR activities in Africa?
We have different types of projects. Industrial end users, food and beverage producers, for example, they are very much focusing on meeting regulations and reusing water as much as possible. So we see an important trend that industrial clients are now choosing for water reuse as a mandatory solution in new factories, in new plants they are investing in Africa. Second, we do see that renewable energy is becoming important due to the very high energy prices. People start to realize that other sources of energy are important. So besides solar, which of course is being successfully applied in this part of the world, also biogas, recovery basically of waste streams from water are ultimately becoming an important source. We just have been awarded a very big contract in Southern Africa, where we are going to help industrial end users to basically take their organic waste, convert it into biogas, so turn it into electricity, into power, as well as the recovery of important raw materials like fertilizer. That electricity is being fed back to those clients. So we're closing the water and energy loop by trying to recover as much as possible value out of their wastewater streams. North Africa, for example in Egypt, we are helping the government in Port Said, for example, in the port where domestic water and industrial water is being mixed, to not only make sure there is sufficient treatment available, but also to avoid that untreated effluent is ultimately ending up as irrigation water for the farmers near to the Lake Manzala. So there, to design, build, operate and maintain a proper infrastructure, which for the next 25 years is basically turning the wastewater treatment, which traditionally is an end-of-pipe solution, into a resource recovery facility, where we are recovering water, which is safe to be used for irrigation, as well as resources, which can be used to help the farmers growing their crops.
Water scarcity will increase as the climate continues to change. How can we tackle this issue?
It's a big challenge, of course, but also it's good to know for everybody that there are a lot of solutions already available. So for us, it's really understanding the problem and trying to develop together with the client sustainable and resilient solutions, which very often also means that customers need to change or optimize some of their processes and really need to look at utilizing every drop of water. Every drop of water counts. Collecting rainwater, reusing effluent, so treated wastewater, as cooling water or in other industrial processes, in order to avoid that the water consumption is going to become too high. So everywhere we see today, also in Africa, that clients are starting to implement sustainability targets, even net zero targets, where they are trying to basically develop a closed loop very near to their facility, very near to their city, in order to make sure that they are becoming self-sufficient in the future. And of course, in places like Dubai, where there are no rivers, there you have to look at other water sources. So desalination here in the region became an alternative source of water.
And in Africa, of course, we're speaking about water scarcity, but also there's the fact that there's a lack of infrastructure for water treatment. Is that also one of the main challenges here in this region?
Yeah, so unfortunately what we see is that the demand is growing, as we were just discussing. At the same time, infrastructure investments require long-term funding, and that is what a lot of countries and cities and municipalities are lacking. And this is here two important developments. First of all, we see in different countries now a better environment to implement public-private partnerships. And the private sector here is really in a great opportunity to take a leading role here. Not only in providing the funding, but combining the funding with proper design, build, finance, operate and maintain. But then of course you also need to make sure that you have access to state-of-the-art infrastructure, using the right pipes, using all kinds of meters and sensors to make sure that you can control and optimize the flow, that you're not losing water, and that again, at all the points where either you have access to the water or where the water is being used, that we help our customers to reduce their water consumption and at the same time make more efficient use of that drop of water against the lowest, of course, possible cost.
Welcome to the second part of our show. Droughts or floods, sometimes both, are a heavy toll Africa pays every year in the face of climate change. And we see it in action in the vast coastal plain of Benin, a region where people have always lived on aquaculture and agriculture. But all that changed with devastating floods, especially in 2010. The country then decided to tackle the threat head-on with a functioning warning system, as Lorraine Rimondi found out in this report from southern Benin.
Most people in Benin live in the south of the country, in major cities such as Cotonou, the economic capital, and Porto Novo, the administrative capital. There is also a vast coastal plain with a network of rivers including the Niger and the Weme. Villagers here have always made a living from fishing and agriculture. However, in recent years, this fertile environment has been increasingly under threat. No one can forget the tragic floods of 2010 that left 46 people dead and 680,000 homeless. Benin is paying the price for climate change, with devastation caused by heavy rain and rivers bursting their banks, as in the village of Agueguez, in the low-lying areas of the Weme Valley.
We often have floods with no warning. Our crops are destroyed and many children are killed.
The school, the village hall and villagers' houses have been flooded countless times.
When the water levels rise, houses are flooded and we have to evacuate people to avoid disastrous consequences.
Faced with an alarming situation, the government has decided to take action. An early warning system, or EWS, was launched to head off disaster. Following the example of systems already in place in Kenya and the Netherlands, the EWS anticipates floods, as well as periods of drought or strong winds, thanks to a graduated scale that runs from green for a normal situation to red for imminent danger. It is now the beginning of the short rainy season, and the region is on red alert. The specialists are working frantically. The situation is potentially dangerous for the inhabitants of 12 communities. 3 days earlier, the monitoring of water levels, morning and evening, on these measuring poles, situated in the rivers, showed abnormally high water levels. The data were sent to the control center, where real-time forecasts are made.
Here we have the forecast for the river Weme at Bono. And the measurements we received from the monitors in Bono. And here in red is our forecast. So as you can see, it is a 3-day forecast.
If the final alert is issued, local mayors will make sure homes along riverbanks are evacuated and the inhabitants moved to safety.
This red alert warns us that the water levels have risen and the river has burst its banks and started to flood people's homes. We contacted the National Civil Defense Agency responsible for crisis management in Benin. They have contingency plans and take the necessary measures. They know what needs to be done.
Climate change can be life-threatening, but also has major economic consequences. 2010 floods resulted in an estimated $256 million worth of damage and loss of revenue. There is, of course, a price to pay for local inhabitants, as with the Niger River flood. The government-implemented Commission for Economic Modelling of the Impact and Integration of Climate Change has just been set up. This sends out a clear signal to the country and its people, but it is, above all, an effective working tool that anticipates the financial cost of climate change and the impact on national budgets. This political decision requires the involvement of several government ministries if it is to be successfully implemented. Benin is one of 11 African countries to benefit from the UNDP-backed early warning system. The country's long-term goal is to work in collaboration with its West African neighbours. Benin is something of a pioneer in Africa and beyond, a testimony to the political will to take its future into its own hands.
We're now back with Menno Holterman, our guest for the second part of his interview. He shares his views as a water expert in the private sector about the risks of tension and even conflicts linked to water. Let's listen to him. For years, the water crisis has exacerbated conflicts and political tensions. What are your views as a water expert in the private sector?
I think we really have to understand that water scarcity, droughts, are resulting ultimately in people having to make a choice about staying or leaving. And that is what people today are also doing. And we see that some of the crises here in the region, or even the wars, originally have started and have accelerated due to the fact that people for a very long time could not sustain droughts, and that people had to look for safer places to have access to water and to food. Which is also causing migration. So it's a topic where ultimately, if we want to make sure that people will stay and can live in the natural environment where they are born, that we need to provide them access to clean and affordable water. That is really where it all starts. On top of that, then you can develop economical activities, which also will generate jobs and making sure that people can develop a decent life. Develop welfare, and that ultimately is boosting, let's say, the economies.
So if we can focus a little bit more on what's happening between Egypt and Ethiopia, you know, a lot of tension there, and we see that this can really put the populations at risk. Can the private sector help in this kind of conflict resolution? And if yes, how?
I think what is very important is that every drop of water counts. So with technology today, with digital, combining the two, we are able to basically help people identifying what is the safe place to stay, where is water going to be available, where to use it in the most efficient way. And that's an area where us as a corporate are really trying to contribute. Education is very important because we really need to understand that access to clean water, or that we cannot waste water. That water is a very valuable source, no water, no life. And that also means we need to take care of water. We need to help valuing water. And in this political and sometimes difficult discussion, we need to understand that water will not stop at the border. A lot of underground aquifers are part of, are underneath 2 or 3 different countries. So stopping water in order to take advantage of it is causing disruption, could risk or could cause floods or droughts somewhere downstream. So I think humanity and governments, they need to have a continuous dialogue in order to make sure that they use water in the most efficient and effective way. And that means that an integrated view, policy, collaboration between nationalities, between all the different stakeholders is necessary to ultimately do what's best. And there the private sector is playing a very important role, but we cannot do it on our own. So public-private partnerships are absolutely critical.
And of course, we cannot talk about water transition without talking about the energy transition. How are both linked, and how are players like yourselves working for a more sustainable transition?
Water and energy are absolutely linked. like water, energy, food actually are also linked very much together. But water and energy, of course, this year became very important due to the increase of the energy prices. Also, the price of water is going up in many places. So we as sector are challenged to help reducing the life cycle cost, the actual cost to produce a cubic meter of water or to treat a cubic meter of water. So that means for us internally, as we are also an operator of thousands of different water treatment plants, that we have to reduce the energy consumption. So we're using a lot of technology and digital tools in order to optimize the energy use, and at the same time try to generate as much as possible energy from the different waste sources which are basically coming out of our water infrastructure. So water and energy are linked and can only be solved in an integrated approach. And that is where we offer a lot of different solutions to our clients, which we are implementing everywhere around the world.
Water has a role to play when it comes to food security. What are players like yourselves doing in that field?
Agriculture, of course, is playing a very important role. And more than 70% of the fresh water in the world is being used for agricultural purposes. So first of all, we need to help the agricultural sector to use that water as efficient as possible. And all kind of new technologies, different technologies are already applied or will be applied in the coming years to basically use water in a very precise way. GPS data, water data, soil data are connected in order to optimize the yield, the crops, the quality of the crops. We have a lot of technology where we are recovering fertilizers, organic fertilizers from our waste streams, which you of course need in order to grow the crops. We see more and more greenhouse farming, sometimes vertical farming, so using, let's say, a closed area in order to effectively use water and nutrients to grow a high quality product. Protein, we see a transition to the vegan part where all kind of natural products, organic products are being used as an alternative for protein, for meat. Also here we are involved in a number of initiatives where, for example, insects are being breeded as an alternative protein, and where we take care of the whole water as well as treatment process of these kind of alternative proteins. Large-scale land-based fish farming is going to replace the fish farming at sea level. Yeah, and a land-based fish farm can only function if there is sufficient oxygen and clean water. So also here you see that water and food security as well as energy are fully interlinked, but water is at the heart. And this is where us as a group, and where SURE with their mission Water is really trying to help our clients to improve the value of water and help them solving their water, energy and food challenges.
Thank you very much for your time. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you, Asha. Thank you very much and good luck.
Well, Initiative Africa is over for today. You can find the interview of Menno Holterman as well as our weekly shows on our website africaonair.com, and of course feel free to follow us on our social media by liking, sharing and commenting with the hashtag Initiative Africa. And don't forget, next week same time, same channel, I'll see you again for a new edition of Business Africa. Have a great week and goodbye.